All right. Good evening, good people. Good evening. I am so glad to be back with you all. This is week 22 of our Bible study series, and we are doing chapter 22. This chapter is covering Abraham and the test that he experienced. And so we are going to jump into our reading of the word in chapter 22. I'm going to share my screen so that we can follow along in the NLT version and then we'll get into our PowerPoint so you all can see more visually. Again, I use Bible Gateway just as a reminder for easy version because I like how you can simply change the version, the translation that you're reading up here at the top. And so I love that feature because then you can compare, like, okay, is that wording used in another translation and what the meaning of these different words mean. So, again, we are going to start at the top, and we are in Genesis 22, and this is says Abraham's faith tested. All right, let's make sure I am good to go. Okay, so it reads: Sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you. The next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took two of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had told him about. On the third day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Stay here with the donkey, Abraham told the servants. The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there and then we will come right back. So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. We have the fire and the wood, the boy said. But where is the sheep for the burnt offering? God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son, Abraham answered, and they both walked on together. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. Don't lay a hand on the boy, the angel said. Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horn in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham named the place Yahweh Yara, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Then the angel of the Lord called again to Abraham from heaven. This is what the Lord says: because you have obeyed me and have not withheld even your son, your only son, I swear by my own name that I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond number. Like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore, your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies. And through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed, all because you have obeyed me. Then they returned to the servants and traveled back to Beersheba, where Abraham continued to live. Soon after this, Abraham heard that Milcah, his brother's Nahor's wife, had borne Nahor 8 sons. The oldest was named Uz. The next oldest was Buz, followed by Kemuel, the ancestor of the Arameans, Kesed, Hazo, Hodash, Jitlav, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. In addition to these 8 sons from Milcah, Nahor had 4 other children from his concubine Rumah. Their names were Taba, Gaham, Tahash, and Makah. All right, so that is Genesis chapter 22 in a rough nutshell of what's going on. Now we are going to switch over to. Oh, looks like I might be frozen. Let's let this catch up here. Hold on. Hmm. All right, guys. I'm obviously experiencing some technical difficulties because on my end it looks like I'm not even on the screen anymore, and I was frozen, but my audio is working, so this is very weird. I am going to refresh it to see if that works, and if not, I might have to end the stream and restart it. Okay, here we go. All right. I didn't want to have to stop it and start over. So here we go. It refresh worked. So let's jump over to our PowerPoint so that we can see a little bit more visually how this sort of plays out. Again, we are in Genesis 22. And so if you're taking notes, the title of our presentation today is going to be The Test After the Promise. The Test After the Promise. You will see why in just a moment. But I do want to make sure that my screen is, yes, I see it. It's good. All right. So we are going to present. So this is again called the test after the promise. And remember where we are in our timeline of how this is going with Abraham. We started reading about Abraham back in Genesis 12. About that time, that is like the beginning of him being called. We have walked through the last 10 chapters and a lot of his life over the last, I think we're somewhere around like year 30 of his time of being called. This is a significant time period because when he was called, he was initially 75 years old. By this time that we are hitting this story in this biblical account in Genesis 22, which is 10 chapters later, we have evolved about 30 years, and we can estimate that based on people's ages. So we know that sometime before this, Abraham had Isaac, and we know how old he was when he had Isaac. He was 100 when he had Isaac. Yeah, I think it's 100. The chapter before this is when Isaac was weaned, and so we know that weaning happens between the age of 3 and 5, and so we know that this is sometime after that. So this is pretty much a guesstimate, but it's a pretty accurate guesstimate because we have at least a range of when this would be. So this is around Abraham 30 years into ministry, as some would call it, because this is the time that he has been specifically called by God. This is his 30 years into, you could say, his personal relationship with God more so, or his pulling away from community and culture that he would have grown up with and going and following God into a land that he would show him. All right, so let me make this screen bigger and we're going to jump into it. So glad to be back yet again. And I pray that God will bless us as we kind of just walk through this. So, the test after the promise. Remember, it starts off saying sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. That is like a summative statement. Usually, especially in these historical texts, you're going to get these statements that are just like a summary of what you're about to read. So you're about to read about the test, And it's telling you sometime later God tested Abraham's faith. Well, we know that sometime later is after the situation I just explained with Isaac, where Isaac was being weaned. They was having a big celebration. That's when Ishmael and Hagar were over there making fun of Isaac. And Sarah said, send them away because they're not going to get the inheritance that my son is getting. They're being jealous. It was a covetous situation basically that was going on. And Abraham was distressed. God said, don't be distressed. Listen to Sarah and what she's telling you to do because she's actually right. Send them away. He promised that he was going to bless Ishmael in his life, and he would have nations as well in his lineage. But he had to separate between his two sons because it was too much competition with that whole inheritance and the covenant that God had made with Abraham. That covenant was designed for Isaac. Everybody knew that. As far as Sarah and Abraham, they both knew that, and so it had to be separated so that there wouldn't be like competition, and you're not allowing this jealousy and envy to develop. Okay, so sometime later, so sometime after that, so Isaac probably would have been about 5 about that time. I'm not saying he's still 5 in this story. I'm saying that this is after 5, but he probably wasn't because it refers to him as a boy. So usually they would still be young. Like you could think maybe like later elementary type of age. So sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called, and look at Abraham's reply. Yes, he replied, here I am. He's ready. This is not the first time that Abraham has been called. So he is ready to respond to God in the way that we all need to respond to God, saying, here I am. Because if God is calling your name, it's something that he needs, it's something that he wants rather from you. And don't be scared, right? Because every time that he calls somebody's name in the Bible, he always tells them, do not fear. Whether it's an angel coming to him specifically or it's God himself, calling, he always says, do not fear. So we have no reason to fear, even if what we, even if we don't know what we're being called for. He is ready. And he said, here I am. Take your son, your only son. Yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will show you. Now, mind you, I'm just going to give Isaac an age. I'm going to give him the age of 10 at this time. I'll tell you why as we continue to read. Because he's got a lot of logic and thought going into this situation. So let's say Isaac is about 10 years old. He is telling him, Abraham, this is, after having tried for children for so long, after Abraham going outside of the design for God for him to have a child and having a child Ishmael, and then God promising him a child through Sarai at the time. Now you're telling Abraham to go and sacrifice his son. The promise has already been fulfilled, y'all. Isaac is born. Isaac is here. He is raising Isaac. He has the promise of, Abraham said that at one point he said, the eldest person in my household will be my slave. Am I to pass my inheritance to my slave? And God promised him then that he would give him a child of his own. This is before Ishmael. So this is probably very surprising in some ways to Abraham because, wait a minute, you promised me Isaac, but you're not going to see wavering in Abraham. He told him to take your son, your only son. So this is just me analyzing the text, and I'm like, this test is coming after the promise has already been fulfilled. There are things that we pray for. There are things that we ask God for. There are things that we work towards goals, and we know God has sent us on this mission. And before we are really to fulfill, I guess you could say, all of the full context of the promise, where Isaac will grow up and actually receive the covenant, will be the full context of the promise. You have this test coming, and you're like, wait a minute now. I know that the God has told me to do these things, so why is this happening? Why is that happening? A test of faith, a test to make sure that the promise has not become your God instead of God being your God. There shall be no other idols before me. Is what God always, no matter what type of biblical account we're reading, God always wants to be the main point. He wants your life to be for Him. Even with Cain and Abel, the problem was he wanted Cain to give him the best, remember, and not just some. So like our focus has to be on God and His desires and not what we want. You don't save the best for yourself. You give me the best. So this is another example of Him calling him to give him the best and seeing if he is willing of his heart to give him the best, or does he have such an attachment to the promise that I have given him that now he has replaced me in his heart. That is the test. Has Isaac replaced you in your heart, or are you willing to still follow me and go where I tell you to go, do what I tell you to do? This whole time, Abraham has been guided by Him. He has moved all over this place. This map right here, at one point, they came down. He stayed here between Bethel and Ai. He stayed in Shechem, which I think is up here somewhere. He has been all over. He has stayed in Mamre. He has stayed in Gerar. He has moved all throughout this land. Right now, he's in Beersheba. He has lived south of here towards the Negev desert. This is not accurate where it says Sodom and Gomorrah. I wish I would have noticed that because I would have taken it off the map. It actually is north. The biblical site was found north of the Dead Sea. But yeah, so Abraham has traveled this land because every time God tells him to go somewhere else, he has to go. So now He's telling him, take your son, your only son. This is a much different offering than he's ever been required to do before. He says, Isaac, the one you love so much. He says, your only son, because remember, Ishmael has been sent away. There is no relationship anymore. There's no sonship, fatherhood type of thing between him and Ishmael. It's just Isaac. And go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you. And a burnt offering means exactly what y'all are thinking. A burnt offering is when you slay something, just like he did in that covenant that they cut, where he laid the halves of the animals on the altar, and the sweet smelling aroma goes up to heaven. It's pleasing because it's clean, and that is the offering to God. So that's exactly what you're thinking. This is a common practice in this time. Remember, he's living in. You see how this says Canaan? He's living in the land of Canaan. This is a very common practice for people to sacrifice their children. So now God, the true and living God, the one and only God, is asking him to do this. Not the God of these Canaanite people, the God of Abraham, the one who is supposed to be different and better. So that's going on. This is in my head. I'm not saying that this is going on in Abraham's head. I'm just telling you in the background all the things that have been happening. This is Abraham's response. See, it's not in text and quotations anymore. That means it's not something he said. What he did was what was important. The next morning, Abraham got up early. God just told him, go to Mount Moriah and sacrifice your son. So what he do? The next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took two of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had told him about. All right. So he prepared to travel. He saddled his donkey, took two of his servants with him. This is obviously not a new practice for Abraham to go and worship, along with his son Isaac. It's probably not new for Isaac either. Now we'll see why later. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering and set out for the place God had told him about. He knew the direction he was to go in because he gave him the land. Moriah is the name of the land. There is a mountain in Moriah. Go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you. Okay, so obviously he is aware where Moriah is, but he doesn't know which mountain. But there's going to be a mountain there that God is going to show him. Okay, so we know he knows the land, so that's where he's going to go. And he's going to trust that, he's going to figure out which mountain it is when he gets there. So that's exactly what happened. Now, on the third day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. So that means that they're traveling and I'm assuming that the others are on foot. They could be on a donkey. It just tells us that Abraham was on a donkey. I don't know. But obviously this is at least a minimum of 3 days journey to get to a place where you could see it far away enough to know where you're supposed to go. So there would be more traveling that's required, but you can at least 3 days in, you can see where you're supposed to be at. He says, stay here with the donkey, Abraham told the servants. Okay, so it's the donkey. This is obviously Abraham's donkey that he is staying here with. The boy and I will travel a little farther. Y'all stay here. We're going to go. We will worship there, and then we will come right back. Now, if you're like me, you're like, wait a minute now. Didn't God tell you to go and sacrifice your son? He says, sacrifice him as a burnt offering. There is no other interpretation of that as far as sacrifice. He didn't mean y'all go sing praises on the mountain. That's not what he meant. As a burnt offering, it has to be a burning. There has to be a fire. Okay, but here's Abraham's faith right here. Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will travel a little farther. Because me and my son going to worship. Me and my son going to make offering. We will worship there and we will come right back. Abraham is intent that God is going to provide whatever he needs to provide. Now, I love this type of faith because he obviously knew what God told him, but he had enough sense to know God always provides. Like Abraham has been walking with God for 30 years. Do y'all think that over that 30-year period, it would take much for him to doubt? He's doubted before. He's questioned even when God promised him Isaac. He questioned that, like, at her old age, at my old age, how is that possible? He's not questioning anything here. He understands there's been so much provision. We have to get to that place in our faith walk where there's so much provision that you don't worry about the little details. Yeah, it's like I know what you said, but I also know that I gotta walk this thing out. And I gotta have faith as I go because I don't understand how it's supposed to work out. I just know that it's gonna work out. Like that is not having what's the word I'm looking for? Like uh, a blind faith in a way. A blind is in you just do whatever and you just don't even think about the stuff that you're doing. It's not a blind faith that I would describe. It's just it's not my business. It's not my job to worry about the details on how something is going to get to be something. That is why we serve an omnipotent and omniscient, all-knowing, all-present God. I don't need to know the details on, well, if you want me to go to this side of town, what am I supposed to do when I get there? Because who's going to be there? And it's not his job to figure out the who, what, when, where, how. It's just his job to do what God has given him instructions to do. Just like anytime we have an inkling, maybe the Spirit is speaking to us about doing something. One thing, it's not our job to figure out, but how, who, how, what, how, who, where. It's not our job to figure out those details. That's God's job. And y'all, if you really think about it, when you don't have to worry about the details of stuff, it makes our job so much easier because you trust that God is going to work it out. I even tell people, even when you are making the wrong decision, we serve such a good God that because you have the best and you have very good intentions, you have the best intentions in doing what you're trying to do, God still allows the grace to cover you. He still allows the details to get worked out. You'll figure out like, oh, this probably wasn't the best decision, and you have to kind of curtail and make adjustments. But he's so gracious that even when you are making the wrong decisions, but sometimes there are things that come up and it's like, well, you don't know what this or this, and it's like, well, neither one of them is probably wrong. It's just that one might be better than the other, and maybe you didn't choose the best one, but you chose one that was still good. And so he still works out the details. He still gets you to where you need to be. And so I'm sure that that's the type of faith that Abraham was going forth with. So now that's being shown to his servants and shown to his son, because at this moment they're saying, we're going to be back. So Isaac is probably like, cool, yeah, we're going to walk over here. We're going to come back after we done. Now it says in verse 6, Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders. Okay, so they were traveling initially, and obviously they had to carry the supplies they needed to make the offering, while he himself carried the fire and the knife, meaning like he literally either they had a fire with them as far as a like a lantern type of situation, or he had the stuff that they would use to actually make a fire, and the knife. The knife is for the sacrifice. So he has all the supplies. He wasn't trying to shortchange God and say like, okay, well, I'm gonna pretend like I don't have a knife, or I'm gonna forget the knife so that, in case he really want me to do this, I really can't go through with it. Like, no, he took all the supplies. That's why it's important. Like, these details are not minuscule in a way where it's not important. Wood, fire, knife, everything that's needed for a sacrifice, it names. It didn't just say Abraham took the supplies he needed for an offering. It told us what it was. So there is no lack of faith in this situation as Abraham is walking this out. So it says, as the two of them walked together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. We have the fire and the wood, the boy said. But where is the sheep for the burnt offering? Here is why it's critical that we know that these are the supplies, right? Because this is what Isaac is picking up on. Because he obviously would have experienced sacrifices and offerings before. And he knows that there is something to be offered that you have. There is the wood, there is the fire, but there is here you only have two of the three elements. You have the wood and the fire, but he said, where is the sheep? So that's what makes me think Isaac is a little bit older than like 5, because I know it says sometime later, but we know that there are intelligent 5-year-olds, so there could be a 5-year-old that's asking this question. um I'm just assuming in my mind that he's a little older, but he's old enough to know that these are the things that we normally do. Why are we doing that? Here is Abraham's response. God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son, Abraham answered, and they both walked on together. So it was important that even if in the back of Abraham's mind, he's like, you are the sheep, and he might want to say that to him, he knows that it's not wise for him to give up that information about his son. And he knows that he is passing on faith to him. So he is strategic about his answer. And he says, and I'm not saying there was something in the back of his mind. I'm just saying, even if there was something in the back of his mind, he was cognizant enough about how he responded to his son to know God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son. So he's telling him, we don't always need to carry a sheep with us. In this instance, God is going to provide us with a sheep. It was an answer that was sufficient enough for the boy. So they went on. I think that's important for us to know too, is that, hey, if he's asking you to do something, there's something that maybe he will provide along the way that us in our current state, we would think we need to have everything with us in order to go do the thing that we're being called and pulled to do. But you have most of what you need. You have, let's say, 75% in this case of what you need, but you're missing one element. Well, that's obviously something that God is going to provide, that missing element. So if God tells us to do something, if we're feeling led to do something, then he'll provide the rest of it, just like he did with this situation in the end. So when they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. Now, this is the moment where I'm like, this is where you can see the impact of Abraham's faith. Because not only did they go up on the mountain, they had to climb this mountain. Abraham had to build an altar, which means he had to pull the stones together enough to create this altar situation. When you make an altar, you have uncut stones that you use. So he had to pull the rocks together to build the altar. He had to place the wood on the altar so that the fire can be lit under it. Then he tied his son Isaac. So he sat there and tied him up. He said, "Come here, Isaac." He done bound his hands, bound his feet, and he lays him on the altar on top of the wood. Now, Isaac knows this is the altar. Isaac knows I'm being placed on the altar. He is not, if he's smart enough to know and cognizant enough to know that we don't have a sheep, then he knows that he is being put on this altar as a sheep. It never tells us that Isaac utters a word. It never says that Abraham had to answer any of his other questions. And I feel like in this story, we would know if Isaac said anything because he told us that what Isaac questioned earlier. So this is how important it was that Abraham's faith was so strong. His what he was telling his son about God providing a sheep was so strong. It influenced Isaac to the point where he didn't need to question. Just like Abraham didn't question when God told him to do what he told him to do as far as sacrificing him, Isaac doesn't need to question Abraham about the sheep that he still probably believes that God is going to provide. Like, this is how important it is for us to have unshakable faith and to, there were 25 years before Isaac was born. That is to help build his faith so that because Isaac is the covenant carrier, he can have a stronger faith because his dad had a strong faith. Like, he didn't have to start from scratch. His dad had already built some type of foundation, a strong foundation for him to now grow up in and have that right influence. He didn't have to unlearn some of the things that Abraham had to unlearn because Isaac was raised without having to be called away from his land and having all these other influences of culture and family in his life. There was this spiritual inheritance that Isaac was able to receive. Now we are seeing the fruit of the spiritual inheritance because we don't see where Isaac utters one iota, as they say, in this situation. He allowed himself to be laid on the altar. And I don't know really why that's sticking out to me so much, but Isaac was just as much willing as Abraham was because he trusted in his father. It is so much of a mirror of the trust that we are supposed to have with our Heavenly Father in the way that Isaac is. And this is a child, y'all. This is a child, and this child is having trust in his father the same way we are supposed to trust in God. He is literally putting him on there to be the sacrifice. Isaac is aware of this. And at that moment, it says, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Like, Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. You're talking about he's raising the knife because you have to kill the sacrifice, which means you have to stab it or slice it of some way. So either is some angle that Abraham is holding it to make, you're going to make one slit or one dash, and that's going to kill him. He literally has either raised it enough or raised it up here. This is just two options to slit or stab. And at that moment, the angel of the Lord. Now it says angel of the Lord. I want to be very careful here. I forgot to look up the chapter, but if you go back to the chapter about Sodom, the chapter when Abraham is being warned about the Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember, there were it refers to God as an angel of the Lord in that chapter as well. So this is the same situation, and I want you to pay attention to how angel of the Lord, when he's using the first person, that's how you can tell that it's God and not just an angel like Michael or Gabriel or something. This is the angel of the Lord in, I don't know the best way to explain it, but you can think of it as a persona of God. Like, this is the way that he's showing up is as an angel, or he's speaking as an angel. It's hard to explain, but when you read it, you will see how this is God talking. But let's read it. It says at the moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. Same way that Abraham replied in, what was that, verse 2? Yes, Lord, here I am. Is the same way he was replying here. Here I am. This is fully me. This I am fully available. How can I help? How can I serve you? Is the here I am type of vibe we're getting here. Don't lay a hand on the boy, the angel said. Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me. Now, this is where it changes to first person. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. If the angel of the Lord was not God himself, then why would it be saying you have not withheld from me? This is the same voice that has been talking to him from that day before. Told him to go sacrifice. It's the same, not the day before, it was like 4 days before this. The same voice that told him to go sacrifice your son is the same voice that's telling him, don't hurt him, for you have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. Logic says, I only have one son, I can't sacrifice him. God says, by showing that you are even willing to sacrifice your son, I know that you truly do fear me, meaning that you reverence me as your number one. You truly serve me as your number one in all your heart. No matter what you're being asked to do, you are going to do it for me. You have not withheld the sacrifice that I'm asking you to withhold. That I'm asking you to give. You have not withheld that from me. And so Isaac is also hearing this. The promise is that Isaac is here. Isaac is his only son. The test Isaac is now understanding is that he was asked to sacrifice his son as a test. So Isaac is understanding and hearing this. The angel is saying, do not lay a hand on the boy. No, before that, let's go back. Isaac is hearing the Lord call out to Abraham. Abraham, Abraham. Isaac is hearing Abraham reply, yes, here I am. Isaac is then hearing the command, don't lay a hand on the boy. He knows that he was told to lay a hand on him. He knows that that is what his father's intention was, to lay a hand on him. Do not hurt him in any way. Isaac is hearing this. Isaac is hearing the confirmation that God is giving to Abraham to say, for now I know that you truly fear God. Isaac is hearing, he's interpreting, he's taking all of this in, that truly fearing God is the goal. It doesn't matter the people, doesn't matter the things that he's blessed you with, the promise that he's giving you. That's not the primary thing. What matters is that you truly fear God. Isaac is hearing Abraham be told that you have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. You are willing to give up the promise that I have given you so that you can obey me. You are willing to do it with what was called of you to be obedient. Isaac is hearing this. This is again spiritual inheritance, y'all. It's so much that our children are taught when they're around us, and they're seeing how we respond to situations, and they're seeing how we talk about God. It's so, the spiritual inheritance is the biggest thing that you can give. Even people who are not your children, we model that for people day to day. In the way that we maneuver, we're modeling this inheritance for people. And this is what Isaac is hearing. He's interpreting it. His hearing did not go out because he was on this altar. There was no fire under him yet. His hearing is well intact. His sight is well intact. He's understanding all of this. And you have not withheld your son. Let's see what they actually experienced together. Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. So his son is experiencing Abraham look and see a ram. Isaac is able to see his father take the ram, get it out of the bush, and then take him off of the altar and put the ram on the altar. He's able to witness his father sacrifice it as a burnt offering. Isaac is witnessing What just happened? You took me and you replaced me with a ram. You replaced me with the perfect clean offering. Y'all, this is it's so important that you understand this story because this is a mirror, such a mirror of what happens with Jesus. God's only son was sacrificed for our sins. Instead of us being on the altar, he sent his son who had to bear the thorns on his head, just like this one is caught, in the thicket. He had to wear that thicket on his head. He had to be sacrificed for us. We just like we, and this is like a visual. I mean, um, it, imagine not imaginary. It's not the word. In your imagination, you can kind of see how you are being replaced on the altar. You didn't have to be the burnt offering. Your life is, you are now willing in your life to serve God, but you didn't have to be that exact offering. He already put his son on that altar for you. It's such a parallel between this story and Jesus dying on the cross. And I'm sure you can. I know I've heard some references to it, so I'm sure that there's some clips or something YouTube or probably even an article that you can read about it. But it's such a parallel. So just imagine from Isaac's perspective, sitting back and watching this happen. Do you know how mind blown he probably is that this is happening and that he is literally seeing the provision? He asked the question a few verses ago, well, Father, we have the wood and we have the fire, but where's the sheep? Then all of a sudden the sheep show up in the thicket. Like he is seeing this, witnessing this, experiencing this. And so it says that Abraham named the place Yahweh Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. Now, obviously, this whole burnt offering takes place, and they actually worship and they actually give the offering. They burn it, they put the fire out, they go back down on the mountain, they go away. Abraham, in his witnessing of this story, because this is not going to be a secret. This is not going to be oh, we can't go back and tell your mama this. Oh, we're going to keep this between us. No, this is obviously something that is told. This is a provision. Isaac is amazed. Abraham is amazed. They all fear God. They understand now what is required to walk this covenant, to receive this promise in totality. Your heart has to be completely um, given to God. They I think understand it in a way that they probably would have never understood it had they not had to experience it. And the name of the place after this burnt offering takes place is called Yahweh Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. So whenever you hear, usually in a song, I know it. I've heard it as Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah. We've talked about this before, and it's like Lord. Um, Jehovah Jireh is the same way of saying Yahweh Yireh, but honestly, you might even hear Yahweh. Depends on. This is a little technical information for you. So Yahweh, there is no there is no vowel in the Hebrew. When they do the Hebrew wording, there's actually no vowels. So when you say Yahweh, it actually would not have been an A here and it would not have been an E here. It would just be a Y, an H, a W, and an H. The reality is that the W can also be translated as a U. So sometimes, depending on who you hear, they will say Yahweh. Some people say Yahuwah. Yahuwah is a much better translation than Yahweh. It's all referring to the same God, same Lord, the same one in heaven above. I just wanted to give you that. And when it says Yireh, sometimes you will see that as a J and not a Y. There was no J in Hebrew. So when we say Jehovah, it's actually Yehovah because it was a Y. When you translate something from one language to another, you try to use the closest sound, I guess you can say, to the present modern day, but they didn't have that language. They didn't have those letters in the old Testament times in that language. So it's just different. J was introduced in the English language much later, and so now we usually translate it as Jireh and Jehovah, which is a J, like a Jehovah's Witness, but it's actually a Y. So that's just a little bit of context for you. But the meaning of it is the same. The Lord will provide. So whenever you hear that terminology being used, Jehovah Jireh, Yahweh Jireh, Yahuwah Jireh, it's meaning that the Lord will provide. And this is the story in which that name of God came about. It says to this day, people still use that name as a proverb. A proverb is a wise saying. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. That's coming from this story of Abraham and Isaac. So I love that. So anytime you see in a reference to mountain of the Lord, that's what you can think of. This is something you may want to take a picture of because it's the reference list that continues to grow from all the names of God that have been used thus far in Genesis. Remember, I've given you the references on each chapter that all of these things have been used, and it's like we continue to be introduced to the character of God. And I love this as a visual because if you understand your life, there is no one point in time that you just knew everything all at once. Knowledge builds, knowledge grows, and over time you learn more. The more you learn, the more you add on to what you previously knew, and all of those things. This is the same way. In the beginning of time, in Genesis 1, there was a certain relationship that God introduced himself as. Over time, this has been able to grow, to add on verbs and characters that describe God better. He is the Most High God. He is the God who sees me. He is El Shaddai, God Almighty. These are all names of God. No, nothing is. He has a name, but these are names of God that show His character: supreme, high, salt. Seeing, Almighty, Lord, provision. These are names that describe the character of how He interacts with His people. And so this is a chart that you can reference where those are. And if you haven't read those different accounts, go back and read those accounts, and we'll also go over them as we talk about each of those chapters as well. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I was trying to make sure I was at the right place. Verse 15. Then the angel of the Lord called again to Abraham from heaven. This is what the Lord says: because you have obeyed me and have not withheld your son, your only son, just like God does not withhold his son, his only son, Jesus, I swear by my own name that I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond number, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies, and through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed, all because you have obeyed me. Y'all, this is the fulfillment of the promise that God gave him initially. He told him a long time ago, 20, 30 years ago, the descendants on the earth will be blessed through you. He told him that before he had children, when it was just a promise that he was going to give him as many descendants as the stars in the sky. On another account, he told him he's going to give him as many descendants as the sand on the seashore. This is the culmination of all of the promises together that God has given. He's confirming all of it, that he will surely bless him. I will certainly bless you. I will multiply your descendants beyond number, like the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies. This is a promise. It's something he already said is going to happen. We didn't need to question it as it was unfolding because he already said it's going to happen. This is when people say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is what they're talking about. This is the promise. Your descendants are going to conquer the cities of their enemies. So I'm really referring to what ends up happening in after Exodus. There needed to be no question when they were going through with Joshua into the into conquering the land, on how who can they conquer. It says that your descendants will conquer the cities of their enemies. It's already there. It's in the promise. Some people let that promise go and they don't hold on to the promise. Why would you not hold on to the promise? Because you have not remembered the covenant. This is the covenant. You have not remembered the promise. You do part of the covenant, like they do circumcision, but you're not holding on to what is the reward that God has given. You're holding on to your flesh, you're holding on to your emotions, and you're allowing those emotions to drive you into fear, to say, like, oh, that's a land of those Philistines are big people and I can't take them. No, God had already said you're going to conquer the cities of your enemy. You will conquer the cities of your enemies. So that's something that we have to remember to also teach us, that the promise that was given is for the inheritance of the people. So if you have been promised something in your generation, you gotta help encourage that faith to grow, so the generations that are coming behind you know what that promise is and can walk in that promise. They don't have to have fear. They can see for themselves, just like Isaac could see for himself. Okay, I know who you are. I understand all of this. Every generation has to have their relationship so that they can continue to walk in the promises. All because you have obeyed me. All because you have obeyed me. Everybody is going to be blessed because Abraham obeyed. We all owe a bout of thanks to Abraham because he did obey. So we could all be blessed because he could follow. It had to be somebody who could follow what they were supposed to follow. Somebody who could do and show that they can listen to God and not not deal with their own flesh and their own feelings. Not just allow themselves and their mind and their hearts to be turned away from God. It had to be somebody who could show and demonstrate to everybody that this is possible, that we can live a life that's righteous. And that's what Abraham did for us, is he gave us that great first example of living a life that's righteous. So then they returned to the servants and traveled back to Beersheba, where Abraham continued to live. I can only imagine the conversation that was going on when they returned to them servants and they started traveling. They had 4 days probably to get back to Beersheba and knew all about what was going on that mountain. So Abraham went on to live his life, right? He went back, and then it says soon after this, so this is a little less time that's passing by, not sometime later. This is soon. Soon after this, Abraham heard that Milcah, so this is kind of just giving us some extra information. It's good for lineage purposes. It doesn't necessarily, you could say, go with the story of Isaac, but it's in the same chapter. So it's a different header. Soon after this, Abraham heard that Milcah, his brother Nahor's wife, had borne Nahor 8 sons. Now, we haven't heard about Nahor since Abram left Canaan. I mean, not Canaan, sorry, he's in Canaan. Since Abram left Ur of the Chaldeans. When he left, it was Abram and Sarai who became Abraham and Sarah. It was their father, Terah. It was their nephew Lot. Remember, Haran that died. Now, Nahor has a wife, Milcah was Haran's daughter, or is technically Haran's daughter. Now, Nahor has sons through Milcah. So it's giving us an update on what's been going on with Nahor's family alongside what's going on with Abraham. Sorry. The oldest was named Uz. The next oldest was Buz, followed by Kemuel, the ancestor of the Arameans, Kesed, Hazol, Pildash, Jitlav, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. In addition to these 8 sons from Milcah, oops, sorry. In addition to these 8 sons from Milcah, Nahor had 4 other children from his concubine Rumah. Their names were Tabah, Gaham, Tahash, and Makai. Now, you never want to skip over the lineages because these people become important. Now, obviously we don't know all of the people and all of the things that's going on, but these names are not just commonplace, they're important for you to at least reference back to. The two that are the most important for you to understand in stories that will come is Kemuel, who became the ancestor of the Arameans. Arameans are going to be important groups of people that interact with the Israelites. As a matter of fact, I mean, you're talking about almost basically integration. And then Bethuel became the father of Rebecca. Rebecca is going to become important. I'm not going to tell you why, but she's going to become important specifically next week in our story. So this is why it's important to introduce this information. This is how Abraham would have known that there were children, and his family back home still had children, and they were having kids and having kids. So not only did Nahor have 8 sons, this particular son has children, and it's telling us one of the children is Rebecca's daughter. Um, and so this is just important to know that, okay, this generation has grown. This generation is now in its this generation is in its infancy. This generation is in its sort of adulthood era. So that is information that Abraham would have been privy to, because yes, he was living in the land of Canaan, in Beersheba specifically, or right outside of the land of Canaan, but he still would be getting information about his family back home, although he was not to travel there. And so that is the end of our Bible study today. I hope that it was helpful to just walk through that, understand some more information about, all that has happened and whatnot. I encourage you to go back through it. I do intend to send something out tomorrow. And I have to play catch up on some of the designs in Canva to do the Bible study guide. So give me a little time, probably another week before I really have that up and ready to go. But I plan to be back next week, Lord willing, and I hope that your time in study was fruitful. And so I will see you all next week. Have a great one, and happy Juneteenth.